Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Brand new episode of the Cabral Concept. This is episode 3190, and we're going to be going over a big reason why so many people feel bloated. They get gas, they get distension in their stomach anywhere between 1 to 3 hours after eating, and it can start to build throughout the day. So if you haven't heard about this before, there is something called fructose intolerance or fructose malabsorption. So essentially it's a disorder or imbalance that's created when there are gut-based issues. Now, there are some very rare hereditary mutations in certain genes that do allow for this, but it's very, very small. And so most of the people, and you would typically find out when you were an infant or a very small child after you started to consume some of the foods that I'm about to share with you. But if you're currently dealing with, and many people are, either a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome, autoimmune-based issues, IBD as well, but also just feeling cramping, bloating, gas, constipation, loose stool, sometimes alternating between hard constipated stools and loose stools as well. And also sometimes just nausea. So you feel kind of sick to your stomach an hour, 2 hours, even more after eating. Now, I do want to share with you a little point on this because let me grab my model here for you. And so when you're looking at my buddy Walter over here, you see that as the food begins to move more into the stomach, here's where your navel would be. So think about your belly button right now if you're not watching this on video. Really just above that, but all below it is actually your small intestine. So your large intestine here is going to run right above that navel, and it runs up the right side, and the transverse colon runs across the top of that belly button and then over to the left side and down. Okay, so that's your large intestine. But a lot of the cramping you get is actually going to happen in the small intestine. That's where a lot of that fermentation is going to take place. We'll talk about that. So all of this below the belly button, if you're getting cramping there, it's very likely you do have a digestive-based disorder. Now, the nice thing is all of that is fixable. And the thing is, you don't need to eliminate every carbohydrate because of this. What we need to eliminate initially are some of the high fructose-based ones, and we'll talk about that. But essentially what fructose is a type of sugar that's more fermentable as it begins to move into the small intestine. So a lot of times if it is mixed with other carbohydrates such as glucose, it'll actually be transported through the first part of the small intestine and it'll be moved in the bloodstream, and then you don't need to worry about all the bloating and cramping and gas. But when the fructose levels are higher than the glucose or other forms of sugar, they're then able to move down into the intestines where they can then be fermented. And if you have yeast or candida overgrowth, or you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that can then feed on that fructose and begin then to produce hydrogen or methane-based gas. And so that is what kind of blows up the intestines, literally with gas, and you start to feel the cramping or bloating. And then as it moves to the end of the small intestine, and into the large intestine, which is called the colon. So the ileocecal valve, you have the last part of I'll show you, small intestine here, the ileum, and it moves into the first part of the cecum over here as well of the large intestine. So what we want to think about is this: by the time it moves there, if your body is still trying to get rid of this fructose, it can bring water into your intestines. And as it brings water in, what happens? Well, causes loose stool or diarrhea. So that can explain a lot of these specific properties, as well as it causing inflammation. And inflammation alone could cause that water to come in as well. All right, so what are some of the issues then as to why someone would get this in the first place? Because, typically, or you can actually get it. I work with many children in my practice, 8 years old, 10 years old, that start to develop this. Okay, so there are different reasons. One, some people can actually be celiac. They can be much more sensitive to consuming gluten. This is not everybody, but those individuals develop then more inflammation. And of course, that can start to imbalance the gut bacteria and yeast levels as well. Children or adults can take antibiotics, and those antibiotics can disrupt the essentially balance between good bacteria and bad bacteria in the gut microbiome. Another big one for adults is over consuming alcohol and or fried food. That's a big one too. So alcohol is going to create a lot of inflammation. It can also allow for more fermentation there in the gut. And then the fried food causes a lot of inflammation in the intestines as well. Other issues just with overall stress, over exercise, anything stressful in the body that's going to throw off the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the balance in the gut microflora can be another. Some medications, of course, can cause this as well. A big one that many people use is a proton pump inhibitor or some type of acid blocker. The issue with that is then you get an imbalance between hydrochloric acid, that's the HCl that's trying to digest the food in your stomach, specifically proteins. And then if we don't have as much HCl, we produce less bile. And if that bile doesn't drop down into this small intestine here, the first part, the duodenum, then we don't get the breakdown of our food as much as it should be. We don't absorb as many vitamins, as many minerals, then of course we become more deficient. So all of this has then a downstream effect. Why am I mentioning all these things? Well, let's keep in mind that your intestines are about 26 feet long. So if you have 26 feet of intestine, there's a lot of area that can become imbalanced. So our job is to first recognize the signs. Are you dealing with bloating or gas or diarrhea, or which is loose stool, or alternating constipation, stomach pain, nausea, cramping, anything like that? And is that pain also happening right around that belly button or below? And if so, keep in mind your stomach's above that. Those are the intestines. And so usually that means, again, I can't provide any medical advice, medical treatment plans, medical diagnosis, but there is something fermenting inside of your gut. So that means there's an incomplete absorption. I'm not going to go through all of the different specific transporters like GLUT5 that is allowing for all of these different fructans and fructose molecules to move through the gut. But what we want to understand is there are specific imbalances that create this. And I did name those. And that's why there's not a lot that you really need to think about. There's candida overgrowth, which is just yeast, right? But it's overgrown, oftentimes because of antibiotics or even food poisoning, things like that, where there's an imbalance in the bacteria. Okay, so there can be SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There can be inflammation in the gut from food sensitivities, then caused some blunting of the intestinal villi and the actual microbiome itself. And then there can be poor food consumption, et cetera, medications. All right, so how do we test? Well, way back in the day, I used to do breath tests at my clinic in Boston. So essentially what we're doing is we're doing a challenge test, taking in some type of fructose-based drink, or there are other types as well, lactose-based drinks. And then you're actually seeing, is there an increase in methane or hydrogen with this breath test? It took 3 hours. You could get false negatives, not really false positive, but false negatives. Not the biggest fan of the test. I'm really not, because some people react to certain foods, but not all. Like that's the truth. And so I like to do something that's more realistic. So I typically run what's called the big three or the gut bundle. And so that's an IgG food sensitivity test. It is a Candida metabolic and vitamins test, also called the organic acids test, that looks for yeast overgrowth and Clostridia bacteria, and nutritional deficiencies, other things like that as well. And then a stool test. And the stool test is going to look for H. pylori. It's an important one to look for as well that we didn't mention. Parasites, another one. SIBO, and just bacterial overgrowth, and then yeast overgrowth as well, although it doesn't do as great a job of picking up yeast as the Candida metabolic and vitamins test. Okay, so those are your absolute best ones to run. That gives you a full picture of your gut. So foods, the Candida metabolic vitamins test, and then the stool test if you want to look for parasites and bacteria. I will say that although parasites can cause bloating and gas and all of those things, if you're failing it, again, below the belly button area, and that's just getting distended and cramping and gas, it's usually, now there can be parasites along with this, but it's usually going to be either the bacterial overgrowth and or yeast overgrowth, and they do coincide together. Now, H. pylori is nice to look for because that can actually be occurring in the stomach and then moving downstream or down track as well. All right, so I'm going to give you the foods to eliminate in 1 second, but there is a way to fix all of this. And here's the nice thing. So many people eliminate carbohydrates in general because when they eliminate them, they feel less cramping and bloating, of course, but they also have less joint pain and less inflammation, etc. Now, I would say that's fantastic. Nobody wants to suffer from any symptoms. I get it, but that's actually the wrong reason to eliminate them. It really is. The reason to eliminate them is maybe temporarily, and we'll talk about that, is to get that symptomatic relief, but you always want to address the underlying root cause. So if you're just eliminating them, you never address the underlying root cause. You shrink the gut microbiome, but you don't ever rebalance it. Like that is, again, and it's not a good thing either. When you shrink the gut microbiome, initially, sure, some shrinkage, if you have overgrowth of bacteria, could be a good thing. But in the long run, can weaken the immune system, can change your mood. These are not good things at all to mess with the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome needs carbs, protein, and fat. Like that's literally what the body looks for in terms of all of its different fuels. Okay, so let's go. How do we fix this then? So the first thing that we do, and I'll share with you exactly what we've been doing for about 15 years in our practice, and it works exceptionally well. Thousands of practitioners use the same exact protocol that we call the CBO Protocol, Candida Bacteria Optimizing Protocol. And so what does it do? Well, it looks at bacteria and it looks at yeast overgrowth. And so if you find those on your Candida metabolic and vitamins test, that's what we're going to do. And so I just want to explain to you exactly what it is, and you can choose to use whatever protocol works well for you. So you want a biofilm disruptor. Almost no one spoke about this until about 10 years ago. And then people started to talk about it, which is good. But after a while, with a lot of inflammation in the gut or parasites or bacteria or anything like that, there can be a film, literally a fibrolytic, so fibrin-based film that builds up around the edges of the intestines and is essentially hiding heavy metals and bacteria and parasites under it. So we use a natural enzyme that helps to dissolve that. Really simple. It's made of proteases and other enzymes that helps to dissolve that biofilm. It doesn't happen overnight. We use that for 8 weeks and we slowly begin to dissolve it. Then we use an antimicrobial because as the biofilm dissolves, we can now get deeper under it. Those antimicrobials, they switch every 4 weeks, so the body's not adapting to it as well. And also different antimicrobials help for different individuals, and you don't always know what works best for you. So the antimicrobials might be things like oregano and clove and black walnut and uva ursi and other berberine, things like that are really beneficial for the gut. And then we use and I have a whole podcast just on the CBO, so I'll link that up today at stephencabral.com/3190. I can also link up the lab tests as well. I just can't link up any of the protocols we do. You can find that at stephencabral.com/shop. That just takes you over to Equilife. That's all. Just a short link takes you over to our virtual functional medicine practice, integrative health practice. So the CBO protocol then has a very specific way to introduce good bacteria back into the gut. First, with a non-pathogenic yeast to push out the pathogenic yeast, the bad yeast. Then it moves into a single strain bacteria, then a multi-strain bacteria to begin to repopulate. So in total, it's 3 4-week courses, so it's 12 weeks total. It's only 3 supplements for each month, and it's very straightforward. And so it works exceptionally well. We've used that in our practice with tens of thousands of people. So not just a couple hundred, but tens of thousands of people. And our practitioners have probably used it with, 50, 100,000 people. So what I also want to share with you is with that CBO protocol, we also then use an elimination-based diet. Now it's very specific. It's very simple, like to go over. It's pick a protein, pick a fat, pick the carbohydrates that you want, and then we share with you how to introduce them. So 21-day elimination plan, and I'm just going to share with you some of those higher fructose-based foods because I want to give you the whole solution. I don't want to present a problem and not be able to help you with the solution. So the CBO protocol will use that. Now, keep in mind, if you have parasites, I just want to say before that, we do something called the parasupport protocol even before we do the CBO protocol because we work on parasites first. And if you have H. pylori, again, I can't give you any medical advice or medical treatment plans. And you should speak with your doctor. If you have any of these things, you're welcome to. We use a product called mastic gum, and we do that for 8 weeks along with either of the other protocols. Okay, so let me share with you some high fructose foods that aren't unhealthy foods because fructose can be, and again, not high levels of it, but it can be beneficial when eaten in its whole form, never in fruit juices or soft drinks or things like that, for actually feeding good gut bacteria, but it has to be balanced. That's the big thing. So let me give you an example. Apples, for a medium apple, has about 18 to 20 grams of fructose, basically fruit-based sugar. Not terrible, not the end of the world, not going to raise your triglycerides, anything like that, unless, again, there are imbalances. Then that's what we have to look at it. So we have to look at bioindividuality. But an apple, extremely healthy for you. We're looking at quercetin and all these great things involved in them, right? So let me just name them though. So usually you're looking for something with 15 to 25 or so grams of fructose per serving. You want to eliminate that just initially, usually the first 3 to 6 weeks. Okay, so apples and pears and mangoes and cherries and watermelons and plums, nectarines, grapes, figs, sweet corn. So those are the ones we typically decrease. I would say sweet corn is on the list, but not one we really ever eliminate. Probably beneficial for most people to eliminate it because of the roughage for the first 3 to 4 weeks, but not a high amount of fructose at all. I think it's around 6 grams or so for like an entire ear of corn. All right, as I mentioned before, fruit juices just aren't a great idea. So an 8-ounce glass of fruit juice, and oftentimes people do much more, would be even greater than having the whole fruit itself. And it's unabated. There's no fiber with it. And so not a great idea in general to have fruit juice. It really isn't. Better to take the fruit itself and blend it, make a smoothie out of it, where then it's lower glycemic, slower digesting in that way. So that's what I would recommend. Dried fruits, dates and raisins can be higher in fructose. However, again, these things don't mean that they're going to spike your blood sugar like a lot of people think. If you've ever seen the glycemic index on dates, it's actually quite low. Even though it's sugar, it is actually quite low and doesn't spike a lot of people's blood sugar. And again, you can test it out for yourself, just with a simple at-home glucometer. All right, a few others I've talked about before, but energy drinks, soft drinks, Coca-Cola, things like that, typically not a good idea. Usually have quite a bit of fructose. Same with candies, candy bars, things like that often have quite a bit of fructose in those as well. Some that you're going to want to limit is agave. I'm not a huge advocate of agave in the first place. Like I don't have an issue with it with a little bit here and there, no big deal, but certainly not something that I would add to anything like whatsoever. It's just not a good idea, I think. Not when you have natural raw honey that you could use or natural maple syrup, which have just much more minerals in them. So speaking of raw honey though, I do say this, and it's not on our list in the beginning. For the first 4 weeks or so, you're going to want to really limit your honey to 1 teaspoon maximum, which would then be about 5 grams or so of fructose. Not more than that because it can act again as a prebiotic because of that fructose. And then just be careful with all sorts of, pancake syrups and fake sweeteners because they're loaded with high fructose corn syrup. All right. Alcohol is one that we typically cut down on, at least in the beginning. Wines can be quite high in fructose, and same with many cocktails because there's a lot of mixers that then have the fructose as well. And then again, looking at any snack bars, cereals, things like that, where there might be higher amounts of fructose added. So you just have to kind of look at those ingredients. All right, so that is exactly what we look for. It is one of the biggest gut issues that really no one's talking about, and that is this fructose intolerance or fructose malabsorption. But you know the signs now. You know what to look for. You know what labs that you can run right at home if you want a true indicator of, all right, what is this really? You know the CBO protocol and even the citricidal drops, you can add to that for more severe cases. And then you know a lot of foods to eliminate. So hopefully this was helpful. All the details will be at stephencabral.com/3190. Take care, everybody, and do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.